Greetings, my name is Finley Livesey, and I am currently, in this video, painting over a portrait that I had just painted. So this is a scrap piece of paper that I was just kind of doodling on, and I wound up with a truly horrific portrait. And so instead of keeping that, I am painting over it in blue, rather passionately. I really did hate that. And so I am going to be painting a still life on top of that. The still lifes are, I usually do flowers when I do still lifes. Still lifes or still lives? I wonder what the appropriate is. I think I'm going to go with still lifes because that just seems the most appropriate. Like, let's see, Leafs. Like the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's just right, Leaves is just inaccurate for the needs of the team. And so I'm going to paint under it a sort of tabletop, a yellow tabletop, because yellow and blue is the ultimate color combination. Honestly, if we're going to start talking about the color wheel, the answer is I don't get it. Because aren't yellow and blue not supposed to go together? Aren't they whatever it is that they're not supposed to go together on the color wheel? Honestly, I don't get the color wheel. What I do get is that I'm trying to paint a terracotta pot now. And I love painting pots, but I'm not the world's best pot painter, mainly because I'm not very patient. And so I usually just vibe with the fact that pots are streaky beasts, and streaky beasts are okay to be streaky. I do really like the idea of terracotta pots, though, because they're so, earthy and real. And I feel like they're good to put flowers in because they have this, natural element itself. I mean, I know glass or crystal is also at root natural, but it's somehow less natural than a good classic terracotta. And they always get me in the mind of the terracotta warriors, so big fan of that. And I feel like this terracotta part is going to really have a burst of color that will distract everyone from the failed portrait behind it. Y'all ever read Agatha Christie? So in painting this portrait, I was definitely thinking about the Miss Marple short story collection, because there is a really quite gorgeous story in there that focuses on Dolly Bantry. Dolly Bantry is pretty much my favorite Miss Marple character. She is a quite impolite squire's wife who lives in the same town as Miss Marple, and she is very openly obsessed with gardening. And in her story that she tells, in the plot of the book is that every person has to tell a story of a murder that they were involved in. And the story of the murder that she was involved in included a woman with flowered wallpaper. And this wallpaper was intriguing because the wallpaper was all different types of flowers. And Dolly Bantry took extreme umbrage at this because there is not supposed to be different types of flowers all blooming at the same time. And so this wallpaper had all these out-of-season flowers all together. And Dolly Bantry just hated this. And Dolly Bantry would hate this picture too, because I've got no idea if these flowers go together. I'm not a botanist. I'm not a gardener. I don't do anything but look at pretty flowers. I don't grow them. And, I only see flowers in their natural habitat at the supermarket. And so this picture has roses. I'm currently painting roses on kind of in a blue because the paints behind is still too blue to not bleed through. And so I've got blue roses, and now I'm doing a big giant chrysanthemum head in the back. I've also got some marigolds up there. And tulips too. I think those are tulips. I honestly don't remember now. So if roses, tulips, marigolds, and chrysanthemums don't go together, I'm super sorry, Dolly Bantry. But I just thought the colors looked nice, which I'm certain is what the makers of the wallpaper thought too. So, you can take it up with William Morris. So, as for paints, I am using student-grade acrylic paints. There are other grades. There's artist grade and professional grade, because apparently artists aren't professionals. I don't get it. Anyway, I use student grade because I like saving money. I've heard a lot of people say, don't waste your money on student grade, buy professional or buy nothing. I hear that kind of a lot, actually, which, if that's what you're feeling, then totally. But personally, I hate expensive things with kind of all of my being. And So if I have something that is expensive, I will not use it because I'm not going to waste it. But with my nice student grade acrylic paints, I can just flop on as much as I want without worrying about it. And not only do I buy student grade, I generally buy it from the secondhand art store, so they're even cheaper. Before this, I used like kids' craft paints, like the ones you buy from Michael's in the little cylinders, the tiny ones that cost like 50 cents to $1. And I loved them, honestly. They're pretty thin, but they've got pretty decent color coverage. The only problem I find with them is that they're not very light fast and they're not very professional. And so I decided in my one nod to professionality to go to student grade acrylic paints instead of child grade acrylic paints. And I really love them. I love that they're more thick. I love that they have better coverage. The colors are brighter. But, I'm really happy that I spent all my time learning with more craft paints so that I could learn, how colors mix together. Because the first time that I heard that you can use the color on the opposite side from your main color on the color wheel to make your original color darker, I did not believe that. I did not believe that one bit. And I had to experiment with that with my cheap paints, and I discovered it was true, and I was completely shocked. And so having cheap paints really gave me the opportunity to try different things. And like this painting, do I love it? Not really. It's not going to win any awards, certainly, and I'm not going to hang it up in my house, as I do a lot of my paintings. I really don't like the color combination, honestly. I think the blue is too dark, I think the yellow is too bright, and I think the pink is just... No, actually, I like the pink. The pink's the only part I really like about this. And so this is purely a practice piece. And if I were using better paints, I would not feel comfortable doing just a practice piece. So now I have begun on the chrysanthemum. Dun dun dun! Okay, so spoiler alert, I ultimately rub out this entire chrysanthemum and paint over it. I decide it looks dorky just hanging out all there, being so giant up on top, and it looks out of place, like a flying saucer hovering above this perfectly normal, otherwise flower arrangement. I don't know if that was the right move or not. The more I look at the chrysanthemum, the more I'm like, I kind of liked that. I should have kept that. The good thing is I took good pictures of it before I scratched it out, so I still have, the painting as it used to be. But, I'm really still not certain about this. So this entire next passage that I'm painting, it goes away. It completely goes away. Which brings me to, something more interesting than a flower that I cannot decide whether or not to keep in, which is the local secondhand art store. I love buying things secondhand because I hate spending money. And so most of my supplies I buy from my local secondhand art store. If you do not have a local secondhand art store, I strongly suggest starting one because it is an extremely valuable resource. I buy much of my paint from there because paint is so expensive. I buy most of my scrap paper there. I buy some canvas there. My easel right there. My easel that I'm using is from there. I buy so many art books there, and they have so much different interesting stuff. I try not to go to the big box craft stores as much as possible, but as much as possible is really more like once a week because I run out of canvases so fast. Canvasini, I don't know what's the plural of canvas. I run out of them so fast because I love painting. And when you have cheap paints from the secondhand craft store, how can you stop yourself? So this is technically a still life. I think of it as a floral because I don't really do other still lifes, as in I don't have other objects with my floral arrangements. I don't do bowls of fruit. I don't do, flowers with bugs flying around them. I never understood why those were still lifes because they're clearly not still. Anyway, what I mostly do is flowers, but if you were to give them a category, they would be still lives. And back in the day, way back in the day, when they had a hierarchy of genres, hierarchy of genres, hierarchy of genres. Back when they had a hierarchy of genres, still lives were lowish down on the list, and also were ones that were considered to be suitable for women to paint, because they were indoor scenes, which they're not always indoor scenes, but they're usually indoor scenes. Honestly, who even knows where still lifes take place? They always seem to take place in this like magical world where all the walls are oddly one color, and then there's a weird table, and then there's just this thing. Like, if you walk around someone's house, that you don't see that. You don't see what happens in the still life. You only see still lifes on the walls, which I guess is why they're called still life, because life doesn't happen like that. It's a still of life. I don't know. Anyway, still lifes are kind of looked down on sometimes. A, because they're lower down in the hierarchy of genres, and B, they're often looked down on like, whoa, well, women were only allowed to do still lifes, and, that's sexist, which, yes, definitely sexist. But saying that, like, devalues the idea of still lifes. Like, sure, only being able to paint things like flowers is lame, but flowers are a pretty great thing to paint. I can paint whatever I want, and I often choose to paint flowers because I think flowers are gorgeous. And I love painting flowers. I love to have pictures of flowers. I think flowers are great. And so to stay like, oh, women were forced to, console themselves with only still life paintings. It's like, well, there's no such thing as only a still life painting. Still life paintings are great. And, the history paintings are the ones that get all the love. And I love myself a good history painting, but you can't keep that in your house,